A story can be true even if it isn't. Stories, the stories we tell ourselves, the stories that shape our culture and identity, are so very important. Think of some of the classic fairy tales. Little Red Riding Hood, for example. I presume I don't actually have to retell the story, although there are various alternative endings, some more gruesome than others. The story offers a warning about the dangers of talking to strangers and being naive or overly trusting. It teaches the importance of caution, vigilance, and the wisdom of following guidance given by trustworthy adults, such as the mother's instruction in the story not to stray from the path. The story reminds readers that appearances can be deceiving and that predators can come in many forms. An important message about safety and awareness, you might say. Or take the story of the ugly duckling. Again, I'm sure I don't need to actually retell it. This story conveys a powerful message about the importance of self-acceptance, self-reliance, and the discovery of inner beauty. It also highlights how those who feel like outsiders can eventually find their place in the world. It encourages listeners to recognize their own worth, to hold on through difficult times, and to appreciate the qualities that make them unique. These stories are attempting to convey important truths to the reader or listener. The first is a cautionary tale. The second is conveying what I will call an aspirational truth. If you actually look at the real world, things don't always turn out quite so well for the ugly duckling. The ugly duckling doesn't always find their place in the world. They don't always discover their inner beauty. But this is the kind of reality for which we might wish, in which such things were indeed true. They are aspirations. You might also call these guiding truths or guiding principles, and they often fly in the face of present reality. They may even be utopian. We know they won't ever actually be true in the sense of being fully realized in this world, but they remain our aspirations. They guide our decisions and our behavior. These truths can also become dangerous. America is the greatest nation in the world is, I would argue, an aspirational truth. Sure, there are many who would argue that this is true right now. However, these same people may well, at the same time, declare their intention to make America great again. So there's a kind of eschatological tension here. In a theological context, eschatology is concerned with the final events in the history of the world or of humankind. So it's a kind of utopian dream. But there's a sense in which it's somehow also manifest here in the present, or foreshadowed in the present, if only as an aspiration. When someone says America is the greatest nation in the world, I think they're expressing a kind of aspirational truth, which also has this eschatological quality. Some people apparently think that this is a worthy aspiration. If I say I believe in world peace or I believe in justice and equality for all, these are also aspirational truths. I don't believe these things are actually true at the present, but they are the truth towards which I aim myself. Clearly, people can hold opposing truths in this sphere. The stories we tell and retell help to express these truths for us in the present. Think of John Steinbeck's great novel, The Grapes of Wrath. Near the end of the book, Tom Joad gives an impassioned speech. I won't try to read it with the appropriate accent. I'll be everywhere, wherever you look. Wherever there's a fight so hungry people can eat, I'll be there. Wherever there's a cop beating up a guy, I'll be there. If Casey knowed, why, I'll be in the way guys yell when they're mad, and I'll be in the way kids laugh when they're hungry and they know supper's ready. And when our folks eat the stuff they raise and live in the houses they build, why, I'll be there. Of course, in one sense, maybe in two senses actually. These words are not true. There never existed a man called Tom Joad who said these words. It's, fiction. But they're not even literally true in the context of the story itself. Tom won't actually physically, literally be there in each of these situations. But we know what he means, right? Christians especially should know what he means. Consider Matthew chapter 25. Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The king will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. The truth Tom is telling here is symbolic. His mother responds, rich fellas come up and they die, and their kids ain't so good and they die out. But we keep a coming. We're the people that live. They can't wipe us out. They can't lick us. We'll go on forever, Pa, 'cause we're the people. This is an aspirational truth, because taken literally, it's not necessarily true at all. Sometimes they can wipe us out. They can lick us. But the truth expressed here is deeper. It's aspirational, even if it never becomes the literal truth. It will remain true in this sense as an aspirational truth in the face of everything to the contrary. This, I think, is very close to the way religion operates. Religion offers aspirational and eschatological truths, often in the guise of literal truths. It's not surprising that the message expressed in The Grapes of Wrath helped to get the book banned or threatened with bans in the US, because the truth it presents is opposed to certain other truths, other aspirational truths. Some objected to Steinbeck's sympathetic portrayal of migrant labourers and criticism of landowners and the banking system. In the 1930s and 1940s, this was seen as promoting socialist or communist ideas, leading conservative groups to label the book as subversive and anti-capitalist. Can you perhaps think of other stories that express rather different aspirational truths? Because, you see, the content of these aspirational truths matters. The stories that we use to convey the aspirational truths of our society matter. Countries often have folk stories or legends that have significantly shaped that nation's culture, history, and sense of identity. In Australia, we have the story of Ned Kelly. Now, Ned Kelly was a real person in the 19th century, a bushranger who was hanged in 1880. But the story as it's told has little to do with any historical facts. Ned Kelly symbolises defiance against authority and has become the emblem of Australian rebelliousness and anti-establishment spirit. His struggles with the police and his ultimate stand in this homemade armour at the siege of Glenrowan have cemented him as a folk hero in our culture. To many, he represents resistance to injustice and the fight for fair treatment. Is this rebelliousness and anti-establishment spirit real? Or is it an aspirational truth, a guiding truth? The Battle of Gallipoli in World War I was a major defeat for Australia and its allies. It's commemorated here in Australia on Anzac Day on the 25th of April. The story as told probably captures very little of the actual historical facts. Instead, the Anzac story highlights themes such as resilience, endurance, and the spirit of camaraderie among soldiers who faced terrible conditions in the trenches and endured heavy casualties. The sacrifice of the Anzac soldiers at Gallipoli, combined with their steadfastness, became central to the creation of national myths in both Australia and New Zealand. The Anzac Day remembrance services honour this legacy, reflecting on the soldiers' sacrifices and the broader ideals of honour and service to the nation. Is this camaraderie and fortitude real? Is it real now? Was it real then? Is it somehow a characteristic, even a unique characteristic of the Australian people? This story, as told, is not about historical facts. It represents aspirational truth. The US has its own folk tales, of course. The legend of Paul Bunyan, the giant lumberjack with his blue ox Babe, symbolises the rugged individualism and frontier spirit often associated with American identity. His feats of strength and endurance help shape the myth of the American frontier, representing a larger-than-life hero who tames the wilderness. This reflects an aspirational or guiding truth rather than reflecting any past or present reality. But, of course, we should always be asking ourselves, is this my aspirational truth? Does this embody my deepest aspirations, my deepest hopes, my deepest wishes? In German tradition, there's the epic poem known as the Nibelungenlied. This epic poem, which dates back to the medieval period, tells the story of the hero Siegfried and his tragic death. The themes of loyalty, honour, revenge, and the heroic struggles against enemies were strongly resonant for the Nazis. The figure of Siegfried, particularly, was adapted by Nazi propagandists as a symbol of the ideal Aryan warrior, a strong, heroic figure who defends Germanic values and purity. This poem came to embody the aspirational truths of the Nazis. Often what politicians are doing is telling us stories. They're not presenting us with facts and policies. They're telling stories, aspirational stories. And when you vote for one side or the other, you're embracing their stories as your own aspirational truth. Which stories you choose to embrace as expressing your aspirational or guiding truth is very important. There are many different stories to choose from. Even if you identify as a Christian and have chosen what you regard as the Christian narrative to be your aspirational truth, there are still actually many different and even contradictory stories within that narrative for you to choose from. These express very, very different aspirational truths. Christian or not, what you choose as your guiding narrative will tell us a lot about you. Choose wisely.